We interrupt this program for breaking news from the Global National Newsroom.
Hello, I'm Robin Gill. We're standing by with the Prime Minister, set to address Canadians this morning for the fourth day in a row. We're expecting an update on federal measures to tackle the COVID-19 crisis. The Prime Minister is in self-isolation at his home. His wife, Sophie Gregoire Trudeau, is also there in quarantine. She revealed last week that she tested positive for the virus. She is said to be doing well. As of this morning, a number of Canadian provinces and territories have declared states of emergency and public health emergencies to deal with the spreading virus. 9 deaths have been recorded, 7 in BC, 1 in Ontario, and 1 in Quebec. In terms of infections, here's a look at the situation across the country. More than 750 people have now tested positive in Canada. Ottawa reported 5 new cases today. There are now 251 cases in Ontario. BC saw a major spike yesterday, 45 new cases, bringing the total to 231. The Prime Minister is ready to speak now. Let's listen in.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Over the last week, we've seen significant changes in what COVID-19 means for the country. Every day, we've had new updates for Canadians. We
have implemented new travel restrictions to halt the propagation of the virus. For example, we are temporarily restricting non-essential crossings of the Canada-U.S. border. We have invested in health and research and unveiled an unprecedented economic plan.
And the economy. I know it's also a lot to take in. People are having to figure out how they can work from home or close up shop temporarily. Parents are trying to explain to their kids what's going on and why school is cancelled. Right now, the last thing anyone needs is to be worrying about how to make ends meet. People need to know they have support for their jobs, their businesses, their industries. And that's what our government has been focused on since day one. Yesterday, we announced an $82 billion plan that will support all Canadians. This includes a whole range of measures. And people should be checking Canada.ca for the latest information. Our team is hard at work with the public service in making sure these new supports get to Canadians as quickly as possible. They're doing a fantastic job already. And I'll have a long discussion with the Clerk of the Privy Council later today to talk about how we can support our public servants and ensure that Canadians can access these new programs. But the bottom line is this: we're giving you more help when you need it. If you're a parent, we're here for you. Just like for the single mom of 2 who will get nearly $1,500 by the end of May because of the increase in the Canada Child Benefit and the GST credit. If you're worried about making ends meet, we've got your back. Just like for the family that was concerned about their mortgage and now doesn't have to make payments for the next 6 months. And if you're helping others, we're standing with you. Like with the Samaritan House in Brandon, Manitoba, that on Wednesday was able to open and deal with COVID-19 thanks to new funding. They were worried because their clients had nowhere to go since everything else closed. But now, with the new support, they can stagger entry to 10 people at a time, extend hours, and stock up the food bank. On vit des moments difficiles, mais on va traverser ça ensemble.
We will get through this together. Whether you need more time to repay a student loan or whether you're a farmer worried about your income, we are there for you and we will continue doing everything we can to help you.
To pull out all the stops to keep you safe. We're moving forward on vital research for everything from better understanding how this virus spreads to developing vaccines and treatments. As part of the $1 billion fund I announced earlier this month, $25 million will directly support 49 researchers and their teams across the country. Their work is focused on developing and implementing measures to detect, manage, and reduce the spread of COVID-19. Across the country, scientists and researchers are working extremely hard. I want to take a moment to specifically thank them for all the essential work they're doing. At the same time, we will expedite access to COVID-19 lab test kits and other medical devices. The reality is that the need for these test kits is growing. Yesterday, Dr. Tam said that officials have now tested more than 50,000 Canadians since the beginning of the outbreak. 25,000 of those were done just in the last week alone. So while we ramp up, we're making sure Canada is ready to keep up. Ministers Haidu and Minister Freeland will continue working with the provinces and territories so that everyone has the resources they need. In times of crisis, Canadians come together. We've heard from businesses from coast to coast to coast who are telling us they want to help. Soon, I'll have more to say about procurement and how industry can help with this effort. But until then, I want to let people know that we are working tirelessly to keep our hospitals, healthcare system, and Canadians supported. On that note, let me take a moment to recognize again the incredible work of our nurses, doctors, technicians, and other healthcare professionals. They are on the front lines of this, and they're doing a remarkable job. We need to support them and keep them healthy as well. But even if you don't work in a hospital, you can still keep people healthy. For example, we still need blood donors. So if you're able, consider going in and donating. Book an appointment online through blood.ca or by calling 1-888-236-6283. On a encore besoin de donneurs de sang. Si vous pouvez faire un don, on vous encourage à le faire. Pour prendre un rendez-vous, visitez le site d'EMA Québec ou appelez...
If you give blood, continue doing that. You can continue giving blood by making an appointment at 1-800-236-6283. There are also other ways of supporting Canadians abroad. A few moments ago, I spoke with President Zelensky of Ukraine about how we could coordinate our efforts. I'll also be talking about with Prime Minister Löfven of Sweden this afternoon. We have announced a new fund to help people get up to $5,000 to come home to Canada or to help support them while they are waiting to come home to Canada. We're working with telecommunications businesses who have agreed to send a text message to Canadians abroad regarding consular services available to them. Ministers Baines and Champagne are working with partners to implement that effort. We want to make sure that everyone has the information they need. There is a great deal of false information, misinformation circulating, and we want to make sure people know how to get help. Canadians can come home and should come home. All those who are having difficulty in returning home, well, we are doing everything we can to help. I spoke about this to the leaders of Air Canada and WestJet yesterday.
Hold. But there's no doubt these are uncertain times. But no matter what happens next, we can count on each other. So keep supporting your neighbors by picking up some groceries for them if you're already at the store. Check in with people on the front lines like cashiers and truckers, pharmacists and hospital staff. Take the right steps like staying home and working remotely to help flatten the curve. And as you do, know that your government is right there with you. We're working to slow the spread of this virus. We're taking steps to support you through tough times. There is nothing we won't do to keep you safe and to protect your health. Thank you. Merci tout le monde. Now happy to take your questions.
Hi, Prime Minister. Mackenzie Gray with CTV News. Yesterday, Premier Kenney in Alberta estimated that it won't be till May or June that social distancing measures will be lifted. How long do you think social distancing and having people work from home will be in place for?
We are going to continue to follow the best recommendations of experts. We've heard anything from weeks to months. We know this is a difficult and extraordinary time in which Canadians are taking difficult and extraordinary measures, and we will continue to do that until Canadians are safe.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Raymond Filion de TVA. Deux questions. Fermeture de la frontière canado-américaine.
Raymond Filion, TVA. On the shutdown of the Canada-U.S. border, when is that going to come into force exactly? You had said in recent days that things will get worse before they get better. Could you tell Canadians what the worst-case scenario is? Regarding the Canada-U.S. border, we are working on the final details with the U.S., but we expect the measures to come into effect sometime during the night between Friday and Saturday. So in about a day and a half. As for the measures and scenarios that we are considering, we are well aware that there can be a wide range of possible scenarios. So with regard to physical distance, closing certain shops, these are measures that will help keep Canadians safer, but will be ready for anything.
We are continuing to work on the fine-tuning of the agreement between Canada and the United States. I think it's almost there. My understanding is that the measures will probably come into place in the night between Friday and Saturday, so in about a day and a half.
CBC News. Prime Minister, President Donald Trump yesterday signed the Defense Production Act, which would allow the U.S. military to help in the production of personal protective equipment such as masks. And the Italian military is also helping to produce ventilators. Canada has its own Defense Production Act with similar powers. So are you considering using them, and under what kind of circumstances?
Yes, we are considering using any measures necessary to ensure that Canadians and our healthcare systems have the supports they need. We've already been engaged with industry on production and ramping up capacity to build and create more equipment. We will, of course, look at military procurement as a solution as well. There's a range of things that we can do, and we will do what is necessary. We
are looking at all the measures that we can and will take to make sure that the equipment people need is available. We've spoken to a number of manufacturers, many manufacturers, to meet the needs of what they can do, to see what they can do to meet the needs of our healthcare system. And we're also looking at military production. Regarding the airlifts Mr. Champagne talked about, are there countries that have been identified as a priority? Where are you at with airlifts, and what about the Canadians on the cruise ship near Marseille? Can you bring them home? We are looking at the huge demand coming in from around the world. Canadians abroad have received a text message telling them who to contact and how to communicate if they need help. I've spoken to the leaders at Health Canada and WestJet, and we have decided to work together to repatriate as many Canadians as possible urgently. As for the cruise ship, I have no information at the moment.
To bring Canadians home. It's time for Canadians to come home from around the world. We recognize that that will be a challenge. That's why we sent out a text message to all Canadians overseas with information on how to share their situation and get in touch with consular services. I spoke yesterday with the heads of our two large airlines, WestJet and Air Canada, to talk about how we can work with them to ensure that there are flights to bring Canadians home. We will continue to respond to the overwhelming demand by Canadians for support. We will be there to help them and get home as many people as we possibly can in the coming days and week. On the cruise ship in question, I don't have any specific information on that, but I'm sure there'll be further updates at noon on the regular press conference.
Guillaume Saint-Pierre, Journal de Montréal. Bonjour, Monsieur Trudeau.
Journal de Montréal. Where are you regarding your thoughts on the Emergency Measures Act? Do you need the provinces or parliament's approval to go ahead with it? Is it an option for you to restrict? Is it an option to restrict interprovincial movement? We will look at all necessary measures. We're not setting aside any possibilities, any measures we might take to keep Canadians safe. However, the Emergency Measures Act is an extreme measure. It has tremendous implications, and it would require legislation. Needs to pass the House of Commons. It does give us strong instruments, but we already have the instruments to do what we need to do now. If we end up having to take measures that could be implemented only through the Emergency Measures Act, then we will consider using it.
You mentioned $305 million that would go to Indigenous communities to help with this pandemic. You mentioned a distinctions-based approach. Could you explain what that means for First Nations, status, non-status, Inuit, and Métis Nation communities?
We are going to be sending money to Indigenous communities for them to use the way they need to keep their communities safe through COVID-19 and support access to supplies they need and get through this difficult situation. We recognize that Indigenous Canadians are faced with greater health vulnerabilities and greater economic challenges than most Canadians at the best of times. There is a need for special support and special care for Indigenous communities and Indigenous Canadians right across the country. Minister Miller of Indigenous Services will be part of the press conference today at noon to answer more questions and to talk about specifically what we're doing with Indigenous Canadians.
Thanks, Prime Minister. Nick Taylor-Vasey from Maclean's. On small businesses who've had to shut their doors already and have zero revenue coming in, say that the help that was promised yesterday, won't help them if it doesn't get there in time before they go bankrupt. What about immediate payroll support?
We have made credit a lot easier to access for businesses of all sizes right now. Those were moves we made last week to ensure that there are loans, there is bridging financing available for businesses large and small. We've also taken specific measures on payroll support for small businesses that will be available in the near future. The help for Canadians will be flowing in the coming weeks. We recognize that this is a difficult time, both in terms of getting these new programs in place quickly enough to help Canadians, and that is why I'm going to be working with the public service to ensure that all our efforts are focused on supporting Canadians through this difficult time. Nous reconnaissons que les petites entreprises.
We recognize that small businesses face particular challenges, and that's why yesterday we announced measures to help them specifically. We also said they would have easier access to credit so that they can get through the crisis. That access to credit should be available very, very quickly. Canadians that need a source of income will also receive help in the coming weeks. We are doing everything we can to fast-track it, but these are new programs, and that is why we're working with the public service to deliver the help as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Merci. The first question is from Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Hi, Prime Minister. I'm wondering what your message is to retirees who are seeing their savings dramatically hit by changes in the market. Is the government looking at, for example, supplementing OAS or GIS, or is there anything that you will be doing for them?
Recognize that the market disruptions are massive, and many Canadians have seen their retirement savings and pensions reduced significantly. We will be taking measures to ease the impact of that. We know that our seniors have worked hard all their lives to be able to retire in comfort, and there is a lot of anxiety there. That's why we will be there for our seniors as well.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question est de Mélanie Marquis de La Presse.
Mélanie Marquis, La Presse. Mr. Trudeau, yesterday you announced a robust assistance plan. What scenarios are you looking at? How many hospitalizations are you considering? How many people might lose their jobs? Can you give us a few numbers, please? We are looking at a range of scenarios, and we're preparing for a range of scenarios. We hope that these can be minimized, and that's what we're trying to achieve with the measures we're putting in place now. We're encouraging people to stay home. We're encouraging them to work from home. We're helping people to maintain a source of income if they're unable to work. We want to get through this with the minimum impact possible and with the lowest number of hospitalizations possible. We are, of course, preparing for worst-case scenarios, but hoping to avoid them. Thank you. Hélène Buzetti, Le Devoir. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. Many people are stuck abroad at the moment and are asking for help to come home. They left recently when the pandemic was already underway. People are saying that they might have been careless. What do you think of that notion? And do you believe that we should still use government funds to bring those people home? What we are doing now is trying to help all Canadians. We are not going to judge them. We're just going to try to help them. That is why we're working with airlines to try to help Canadians come home at a very difficult time.
We're focused on trying to get our air operators to facilitate more flights to get Canadians home. We recognize that this is a very difficult and exceptional situation, and we're just going to be here for each other. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you.
All right, you just heard the Prime Minister addressing the nation on various issues, some new details on plans to temporarily close the Canada-U.S. border. For more on that, let's bring in Mike Armstrong, who's in Ottawa. Mike, we now have a timeline for the closure.
Finally, we've been sort of waiting for that. We're hearing now, according to the Prime Minister, that border closure will come into effect Friday night into Saturday morning. He said they're still fine-tuning the measures. There is a lot to be negotiated, a lot to decide in conjunction with the U.S. To have approval on what constitutes essential service, or essential travel, and what is non-essential, who will make the list, who will be allowed to cross the border and who won't be. The other challenge for them is dissemination. They have to get that information to the border guards right across the country on both sides, by the way, north and south.
They're fine-tuning the details, according to the Prime Minister, with the U.S. Second question here, what about the Canadians that are still abroad? He said he didn't want to judge them, but he wants to find a way to repatriate them.
Yeah, the Prime Minister said a couple of times that he's been speaking to Air Canada, WestJet, to make sure that they're there and they know how they can help get Canadians home. That last part was interesting. We're trying not to judge Canadians who perhaps left last week or things like that. But these airlines are ramping down. They've got fewer and fewer planes in the air. And so there's an urgency to getting these Canadians back as quickly as possible. He also said he's spoken to the leader of Ukraine today. He's going to be speaking to Sweden, all in an effort to facilitate getting those planes in, getting those Canadians out. And as well, they're also working at getting text messages to Canadians abroad so that they know who to contact, how to get what consular services are available for them. There's a lot of misinformation out there, the Prime Minister said, and he's trying to get them good information.
Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister is a bit more realistic about the situation with Canadians abroad, saying that they might be stuck there for weeks because airspace is closing. There aren't as many flights as we had before.
It's tough. The Prime Minister has been saying for more than a week, I think, it's time to come home and it might be too late. Or he said before it's too late, and too late is coming. There are fewer and fewer planes in the air, fewer routes. Canadians can come home. By law, the country can't tell a Canadian at the border, you can't come in. That's fine. But if there's no flight to get you from London to Toronto, how are you getting home?
All right, Mike Armstrong in Ottawa. Let's go to our chief political correspondent, David Akin. David, what were the big takeaways for you?
Well, I think today there was no actual announcement per se. There was no, as with yesterday, big aid announcement or whatever there was. As you guys have been talking about, there is some new information on when the Canada-U.S. border is going to close. But I think what we're going to see now really is our Prime Minister, and we're probably going to see this with premiers and mayors across the country, again, sort of playing the civic leader duty, trying to calm people down, reminding people about the tasks that we all have to take, about social distancing and so on, reminding people that the government is planning to stand by. And there were some hints that there may be some more measures. Interestingly, there was one question, I think it was in French, when the Prime Minister was asked, could we see a situation where we may have to limit interprovincial movement? In other words, to restrict movement of Canadians within Canada. And of course, he said nothing is being ruled out. It would take some legislation. Earlier today, Finance Minister Bill Morneau, just to catch people up as well, did say that the government is working on some legislation for some of the aid packages announced yesterday. And we could see some parliamentarians, and you wouldn't need many, believe it or not. You only need a quorum of 20 MPs for the House of Commons to do something. And that could happen over the weekend or Monday.
David, the Prime Minister also talked about calling out to industry to build more ventilators. Expand on that.
Mm-hmm. That's right. So not only industry to build more ventilators, but also what about doing what some other countries, notably the United States, are doing, and calling on the military to assist either with the production, the distribution, you name it. And once again, the Prime Minister here saying nothing's been taken off the table. In fact, they are actively considering how they can use the Canadian forces to get equipment to wherever it has to go. Obviously, respirators are the big deal right now, to get enough respirators built. We've seen all sorts of stories of distilleries across the country converting from, making vodka or whatever it is into making alcohol-based sanitizers. So industry standing by, ready to go. If you take out the social feeds of the Chamber of Commerce President, Perrin Beatty, he's putting the call out any manufacturers who can quickly retool and make some much needed equipment. Put your hand up. There's work to be done.
All right, David Akin in Ottawa. Let's go back now to Mike Armstrong. Mike, the Prime Minister has been very visible in this crisis despite being in self-isolation. As David just said, there wasn't a whole lot of new information today, but this is the fourth time in a row that the Prime Minister wants to be out there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and it's not easy for him. He's in self-isolation. His wife is sick. I spoke to the finance minister about what it's been like to work with the Prime Minister in that situation, and he said it's actually gone quite well. He said he's finding it harder to work with people over the phone that you don't know, but he said, I've worked with the Prime Minister for 5 years on a daily basis, so working with him over the phone has been no problem. But it kind of feels like one of the things I've been thinking about is the HMCS Fredericton set sail January 20th for the Mediterranean as part of Operation Reassurance to help in sort of Central and Eastern Europe. And Operation Reassurance sort of feels like the name you could give to that stepping down the stairs that the Prime Minister is doing each day as he tries to tell Canadians, we're there for you.
It's a very measured tone, though.
Yeah.
Trying not to, panic Canadians at the same time.
Exactly. Trying to say one of the main things that I keep taking away from all of these is the importance of reminding Canadians that the supply lines are open. Because if you go on your Twitter feed, you're going to see those pictures of store shelves with nothing on them. And people who aren't leaving their home are nervous. You're not, it's good to remind people that, things are still moving. Things are getting to the stores. And we keep hearing they've spoken to the grocery store CEOs. And so we know those shelves are being restocked. As a matter of fact, you're starting to see the pictures on Twitter, I'm happy to say, where people are pointing out, no, look, there's milk in my grocery store and there are eggs in my grocery store. That stuff continues.
What about how long this social distancing could last?
Yeah, that's a great question. They really don't know how long it's going to last, and it's a real challenge. It could be whether it's 3 weeks, 3 months, or 6 months. But I'll tell you, I have a cousin who right now, her parents have just come back yesterday and they're in the same house, so they've had to isolate her parents in a part of the house. But at the same time, her husband is a doctor and they've had to isolate him in another part of the house. It is extremely complicated, and it just shows you, especially what doctors are doing, doctors and nurses and healthcare workers, the challenges that they're facing, because it's hard to just go back to your family at the end of the day.
Something we have never seen in our lifetime. Thanks so much, Mike. Once again, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced the new restrictions at the Canada-U.S. border could take effect late Friday night or early Saturday morning. Things are still being hammered out with the White House. You can find full details on globalnews.ca and on Global National tonight. I'm Robin Gill. Thank you for watching. We return you now to regularly scheduled programming.
This has been a special report from Global News.